Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the weekly Adobe Creative Educator live stream show. Today is Thursday, April 16th, and I am live streaming here from San Francisco, California at home. And today I'm very excited to be joined by our very special guest, Rebecca Hare, who is an artist, an art educator, and also a designer. So Rebecca, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's actually really nice to talk to somebody someplace else and not just be typing all day with my students. I teach art and design at a high school level right now. I've taught pre-K through second grade. I've taught fourth grade, middle school. So I've sort of taught all the grades. And before that, before I got into education, I worked as an industrial designer in Italy for 10 years and came back, got my master's in education, and I've been teaching since then and helping teachers design learning spaces. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I'm obsessed with creativity and having kids create things and empower them with different amazing tools. So it's really great to be here with you guys.
Well, we're so excited to have you. And I know there's been a lot of transitions going on with moving to online teaching and also with your kids at home. Like, how has that transition been? How is it going?
It's insane. I think I have a 9-year-old and a middle school student, a 13-year-old. And so it's been amazing to see from the parent end on these other, like what their teachers I think are doing brilliantly, where we're getting lost and confused. I think it's helping with my own students. For me, with my students, I teach sculpture. And so we can't send clay home with kids. So we have to really rethink like just the entire way in which they're going to interact. We don't have access to all the software all the time. So it's really about what are the most meaningful experiences we can give them. And I think we're really learning in and honing down on like what is the right amount of workload, the right amount of connection, and expectations for kids, just to let them know that we're really there. I think the entire work is shifting into a different way of working and being with kids.
Yeah. And I know we'll get into this a little bit later, but just kind of off the top, what are some of the ways in which you've been allowing students to create at home if they don't have clay, if they don't have some of those resources or software? Yeah.
Well, we been brainstorming with a lot of other great art educators. And so for me, if I were doing something digital, my go-to is really Spark, because that is platform agnostic. They can work from any kind of device, and kids have all different kinds of devices. My school district was amazing. The very first, like before we even started on online learning, they distributed devices to all the students. Like they did it over break, and teachers came in. It was like, honestly, we have the most incredible leadership. I work for Clayton Public Schools in St. Louis, Missouri. So super proud of that. So really for my students, they can start working and create almost anything without a lot of my direction. In Spark. A lot of them also have the Creative Cloud, because we have that under our school. So if they have a computer, they're working on that. For my students, for sculpture and for other things, I want to get them off of a device as well. There's so much time that they're just typing, they're just in screen time. So I have a project right now with my sculpture students that they're making a kinetic sculpture. They can put it anywhere, and I gave them the challenge to use recyclable materials, like whatever they have in the recycling bin. Did a little video with cutting up like plastic bags and tying them and trying to show them just different ways to reimagine materials. And it's not about them ending up with a beautiful sculpture in their garden or in their home, but really the process of trying things, of looking at the world differently and finding different ways to create.
Yeah, I love that sustainability piece too, and being able to access all the things that they have at home. And I know we'll talk a little bit more today about spaces and the importance of space, but what is the importance of creativity, of cultivating creativity in a space, and how do you go about doing that? I would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Well, I think when your environment affects your behavior. We know this. When we walk into a certain place, that space tells us what to do. It tells us how welcome we are. It shows us which tools, materials we have available to us. And so for me, I think, if we're thinking about a physical space, it's really important that you have spaces that are going to support your body and your posture for the thing that you're going to do. You never see a chef in like in a lounge chair in the kitchen. They're standing, they're leaning over things, and so it's not like and they're able to move and access things. So reading is something that is a more passive activity. It's really nice to kind of curl up with. When I'm doing when I'm conferencing with my students or a lot of typing, I want to be sitting up so that I've got the right posture so my back doesn't hurt. So I think thinking about your body and that you're going to create spaces that are going to allow you to move in a lot of different ways, and you have a space that you feel comfortable in and you're excited about. So keeping our house tidy in this time has been really important because I get overloaded when things are really messy. So for me, it's like, okay, every night it has to be tidy, and like midday, we're making sure we're putting things away for my own mental health.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I do the same thing. I think it's about having just even that visual white space to have room to be creative.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know you and I have spoken before about creativity versus creative teaching. So what is the difference between those two, and how can educators think about it?
Well, it's fun because I think there's been a big push and so much pressure on teachers right now. And I think what we can really tap into for us creatively is taking some risks, not with students' data or their privacy, but taking risks with like, okay, I'm going to try this. This might be a really interesting way for us to engage with the material. And I want feedback from you guys at the end. So a teacher can do that and start to change up their material. So a teacher can teach creatively. And that's super awesome. And sometimes teachers go create the most amazing experiences that kids are learning information through. And that's really awesome. But if we want to empower our students as creators, we have to be not teaching in a creative way, but teaching for creativity. Because who does that creative work is the one getting that creative muscle practice. So making sure that we're providing opportunities for our students to come up with to look at things from different perspectives, to come up with a lot of different ways of thinking of solving problems, that they're developing their own questions around the materials. So really developing them as a creative thinkers and stepping back as the educator in that space.
Yeah, and I love thinking of it as who is doing the creating. Is it the teacher or the student, and in what capacity? So I think that's a really important distinction. I'm looking at the chat over here, so we've got more people joining in. So Patrick, nice to see you from San Francisco Unified School District. We have a comment here that says, so true. I always tell my students they need to have a space before they begin to create, and teaching creativity as an art, which I love the way that this attendee has phrased it.
Yeah.
And, with a lot of schools moving to online, I know a lot of teachers are overwhelmed. They're kind of in survival mode of, okay, now how do I move my curriculum to a virtual environment for the rest of the school year? But how can teachers continue to make the virtual learning experience creative and collaborative? What are some ideas?
Well, I think, and I'm learning this constantly. I've done 3 or 4 things that were complete and total failures. I decided that every day my students were going to have a new photo challenge, and about half of them were excited about it, and the other half were like, I can't believe you've done this. Like it became, instead of something exciting and empowering, something totally overloaded. So their feedback made me change. So I think like as their teacher, I'm trying to take risks and do things and then correct when I know that it's not getting the results that we want. So for our kids, we can model that by doing that in our lesson planning and our learning experience planning. But for them, we need to encourage them to take risks as well. And there's different ways to do that, like risks with their thinking, risks with like changing their perspectives around the content. And I think also really encouraging them to take risks with how they're going to share their knowledge and what artifacts they're going to create. So providing them opportunities to have multiple means of expression. Just that I think is like, great, I want you to show me this information. Here's 3 or 4 choices on how you can do that. What makes the most sense to you? And then you're allowing them to creatively express what they're learning, and then hopefully developing their own questions around the content that's helping them develop that creative thinking around the learning. I think if you can make creativity a goal in, if not all, most of your lessons, that's going to help kind of set that stage for your kids to really get in and do that kind of creative thinking.
Yeah, I love that, the thinking through that process. Are there any ed tech tools or virtual tools that you've used that have been helpful to help facilitate this kind of creative and collaborative virtual classroom?
Well, for me, my students are high school students, so
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because you'd think that that would mean that they're incredibly tech savvy, and they still get lost. I find that when you have to click out of your LMS into something else, you like somehow out of sight, out of mind, you've lost where the assignment was, something's happened. So I always try to make as few clicks as possible. I'm trying to have some content where we're collaborating. So they're going to do work, and we because of the restrictions from my school for data privacy for students, we don't have all the options available to us. But
Mm-hmm.
Jamboard is really great when you want to see a lot of different kids' ideas and thinking around something.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty intuitive. I've seen my son's teacher uses it with him, so that's really fun for different kind of creative thinking and words. And then Padlet's always really great because kids can show their work, and then other people can comment on it if you allow that to happen. And just a really easy one is just doing Google Slides, assigning every student the slide, and then kids can comment on each other's work. That was the first thing that we did. And I think that for my students' work, because they got to see everyone else's work, and they all had exactly the same prompt, they saw how everybody did it differently, and it was all great. And we had some really fun comments and really good connections. Like I realized almost all my students have dogs, because there were like photographs of dogs and all of this. And I had no idea. We'd never discussed this before. And so I'm getting to see them and connect with them in a way that I hadn't before.
I love that. And I know you just got a dog too, which is
I did. Yes. She's probably like tearing something up. No, my daughter is watching her right now. That was our big promise. I was like, when I'm doing work with my students, it's like, like someone else has to have the dog. And but it's been really fun and exciting. Like what I'm actually excited about what my kids are doing right now is they're doing a project in an Adobe Spark Post, which was actually like I kept feeling like that Post was too simple because we use the Creative Cloud because I teach digital graphics as well. And I'm actually having them like hack into it and change things and really learn how to move it around in ways that they hadn't before. So sometimes a simple tool and really taking it and looking at it in a really powerful lens. Like what can you do? What's the most maximum thing you can do to have control with this? So that's where, and I get all their things are going to get turned in tomorrow. So I'm really excited to see what they were able to do with Post. Yeah.
No, I love that. I can't wait to see those posts too. It's always amazing what students can create either with templates or, from scratch. Before we move into, I know you have 5 ideas for making your at-home teaching space creative, but I wanted to also give a quick reminder for those who are watching live. If you have questions, go ahead and tweet them, respond to the tweet, or if you're on Facebook, just go ahead and type in the comments of this live stream your questions. I'm actually going to pull a couple up. I see Dennis, nice to see you, is just joining us from the National Art Education. So thanks for joining. I also have a comment here that this educator has found it's important to have some familiar remain from the classroom to the virtual. So there's some cadence there. But a question here from Misty, thanks for writing in, is I have many students who do not have internet access. Do you have any suggestion on programs?
I think that becomes really tricky because it totally depends on what the computer or the system that they're working with. If they don't have internet access and they're using phones, then the phones, we're presuming that the phones have access, then there are, you can get through almost any one of the Spark tools. If you're thinking about just something to create with, you can do most of that work on a phone, but it's really small and you're using your thumbs. It's not as natural. I know that districts around, and my district included, and our whole area, if students don't have access to the internet, we're providing Wi-Fi for them. And so we're trying to connect that. And sometimes that's a little bit slower, but that really feels like something that the school should be supporting, the community should be supporting. Because as a teacher, if you can't reliably give students, it's not equitable to give students assignments that they cannot fulfill.
Definitely. And I just, Misty posted in the Facebook chat a post we did from last week, actually, we had educators on from Atlanta Public Schools talking about equity and how to provide, how they're providing internet access and some grants. But then also, as Rebecca mentioned, some ideas that are offline that don't require necessarily internet access. But just another question from Shirin. We will definitely be recording this, and so you can access it at any time. It'll be on our Facebook and Twitter channels. And one last question before we move on. How are kids doing with using Padlet?
I think I would say, like, every time we click onto something new, I've seen, like, for my own students, for my kids, it's been, sometimes we get lost on things. I think it's really, I think Padlet's really intuitive. I think every time you're going to introduce a new piece of software, it's really like, you're going to have a video that's like, you need to click on this, you need to click on this, and the videos need to be less than 2 minutes. And so I am doing so many just quick videos and trying to then really design my LMS. We're using Google Classroom. That is what we are required to use. And so I'm doing like, hey, here's how you find assignments, because it's not the content that my students are struggling with. It's how to get to it, how to turn something in. Did I turn it in? It's everything around it. And so as much as we can streamline that, I wish it were all so much more simple, that things would open up within. And I just see with I get lost helping my son with his assignments, and I'm a teacher. So and I should, it's embarrassing, but I don't know where some things go. So I think Padlet's really great because you can see everything on there, and then you can allow comments. And I've we've used that Jamboard with my 9-year-old. So, but a lot of the stuff needs adult help, and they need videos.
Yeah, and we'll continue to share out more resources for Padlet, definitely. So I'll share those out in the comments of the Facebook post after. But thank you for all your questions, and again, if you have more, continue to post those in the chat. But Rebecca, moving on to teaching spaces. So we think a lot about our student experiences, but then there's also the teaching space at home, and I know we have a wide range of realities of what our home environments look like. But I know you have 5 ideas for how teachers can make their at-home workspace a bit more creative. So I'll hand it off to you to go through some of those. And I'll post in the chat here on the Facebook post that we wrote a blog post highlighting these as well. So you can check that out at any time.
Awesome. Okay, so the first thing I think, and I've worked remotely and virtually before this and for a while, and my sister has been doing this for 12 years. So we have lots of family discussions on this. I think the first thing to do is change up whatever your desk is. Even for your kids, like my son needs to sit up straight to do his typing, and his writings, when he does it, his handwriting is all messed up and he doesn't actually finish when he needs to get started when he's on the sofa. So I like to think like a quick dirty rule is like 3 places. Is there a place you can stand? Is there a place that you can have like a hard seat, maybe sitting on the floor at one point? I love the couch panini idea where you're on a couch, a blanket, a pillow, and your computer on top and you're typing. That's my favorite place to work. I also like following the light during the day to be in as much natural light as possible. So for me, it should not be one space all day. So if you can create it, like in the morning, I sit at the kitchen table for 2 hours, then I move and go over there. It's going to also help break up your day that you're not in the same spot. And there might be just like, maybe it's Friday afternoons, you treat yourself by like working, out of your bedroom, like cuddled up in bed with like a nice cup of coffee. Like there's just trying to make each space something celebratory.
Yeah, no, I think that's so helpful. And just even within our own work here at Adobe, I know for some of us, we're working from home for the first time and have a lot of educators also on our team. So definitely light is so important throughout the day.
Light is important, moving and changing up your posture. So if you can stand for some of the day, there's so much interesting work on ergonomics, and most of us did not buy the most ergonomic chairs for our homes, thinking that we'd be in it for 9 hours. So every time your body moves, it's good. And getting up and taking those movement breaks and standing, you actually have like 40% more pressure on your spine when you're sitting than when you're standing. So just you trying to actually push yourself to keep moving your body. You will start to, and if you haven't already, you're going to start to have a lot of aches and pains. And I think it's just nice to be like, oh, great, that's my morning spot. Now I'm going to move over here. And you can have like a 1-room apartment and just move in a couple different places, change your view. And that works as well. It doesn't have to be like, a giant home. So my next tip for this is getting close to green. I think there's some really interesting research around biophilic design. It's been around since I think like the 80s. And it just basically means, for all our purposes, bring some green things inside, like having some plants. I have some all over my house. I sometimes just get them at the grocery store. Sometimes I had them before. I have a sunroom that I get to go into sometimes when I've got like lots of big green plants that I've been cultivating for a very long time. It changes your mood. And they've actually shown that it increases your immunity, which is really important right now, and your productivity, your focus. It reduces stress. So just bring something green, sit next to something green. If you can't, try to get outside, get near a window, get that natural light in. So that's something else. And again, it doesn't have to be something big. It can just be the smallest thing. You can go outside and cut a couple flowers, put them in a glass, and you're closer to something green.
Yeah, I have that in my apartment right now too. I've ordered flowers, and even I have cacti require the least amount of water. No, it makes a huge difference. It makes you feel like you're in the outside environment too. I love that.
Yeah. I kill my succulents. I overlove them. I can't keep succulents. It's one of the things that they're not good in my care. So my next favorite thing to do, and I think this is important in life and a great thing to kind of bring forward, is just to include the rituals. So for me, and I struggle with this because again, it's about like trying to have your day. You're not leaving as much, you're staying home. So how can that day feel like it's moving forward and you're not stuck in like a Groundhog Day moment? So for me, it's like in the morning, I get up, I make myself a coffee, and I'll sit and I'll do work for about an hour in my kitchen. Then I know at 10:30 I'm going to make myself another coffee. And so I'm looking forward to that moment. That's like my 10:30, and I take a break and I go outside, usually to watch my puppy, like run around and dig and do something fun. And so that is like, I'm waiting to 10:30. I'm really excited about that one. I also, then before lunch, I'll try to do some exercises. And so like that, I try to always stop everything. So having these kind of ritual things, and especially like at the end of the day, saying I'm going to be done by 5:30 or whatever that time is. And that's when I'm going to do like a celebratory kombucha, or I'm going to eat a piece of chocolate, or I'm going to watch my favorite show, whatever that's going to be, and just have that ritual every single day. And then eventually you'll start to be able to sense time and progress between the different rituals. And it's something that you get to look forward to. So they should always be things you want to do.
Yeah, and I know there was a comment earlier about bringing pieces of the in-person school day to the virtual environment, and this is so true. You would have hopefully, a break for lunch or the early morning break. So I think that's been really helpful too. And I know it's hard sometimes at 5 o'clock. You just keep working because your environment hasn't changed and you're in the same place. And then all of a sudden you look at the clock and it's 8 p.m. So having that, whether I've also been doing kind of those live stream workout classes or going on a walk, like it helps to break it up. So love that idea.
Yeah. And it's great if you can get other people into it that are going to be your accountability buddy. I think that, just saying like, hey, we're going to have like Thursday happy hours. Yeah. And like, you have to be there. And and just to make sure that we are actually taking care of ourselves, because we don't need, like, we've got enough pressure with work and with really caring about these kids and being worried for them. We have to create an environment that we're going to be productive and healthy in. And I think that the rituals are nice because they really base around taking care of yourself and treating yourself and having a celebratory day. All right, so next one is, I think it's really good to visualize your progress. And so a lot of people do this with lists like, did I email these students? And it becomes this, again, like a work list. I like to think about this again as like, this is sort of a self-care, like really helping to make yourself creative, taking good care of yourself piece, where you're making a list, but it's about like all of your non-work items. Did I go for my walk? Did I call my favorite person? Did I read a book? Am I making time for that? Did I exercise? Did I take time to take a shower? And have these things up, what you need to do. And as you cross them off, you're, again, like that helps mark your day out, and it helps you feel really accomplished. And it really, when we're more happy, we're more productive, and we are more creative. So that is something that, again, like we can be like, well, why would I shower? I don't need to change my clothes. I don't have to do these things. So you bring all of these pieces in, that you actually end up feeling better at the end of the day by taking good care of yourself and seeing that progress up.
Yeah, I think it's making, even though we have lists sometimes for our work-related items, having those pieces for other non-work related items is so important, because sometimes, again, we're so wrapped up in things and in one place, we forget. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, and my sister, she's been doing this for 12 years, working virtually, and she's like, when I have important meetings, I put on a dress. Yeah. And she sits, and I was like, why? Why would you? We could just stay in sweats. And she's like, it changes how I feel. I feel like I've done something. And she's right. I think it's really great. I don't have a dress on right now though, so I'm not quite there yet. So my last thing, I think that, again, this is for any home, any person. There's nothing. It's not like you have to have a golden wall. I think having some physical white space that you can actually doodle on. It would be super awesome if everybody had a whiteboard that they could make these, they could make these visual pieces. And I'm like pushing that, like, there's some really great whiteboard apps out there, but I think that this could be something that's physical. We are so much on our computers that anytime we can actually have some moments to think. So if you have an old sketchbook that's kind of big, or pieces of paper, and sometimes I've done this before. We've done entire planning on windows with dry erase markers, and just been like writing things on there, playing things on there, having something that's visual. For me, everywhere I go, I have 2 journals, and I bought the biggest ones that I could buy. And so they open up, and I can just do all my doodles and my thinking. I can do all my planning inside of them. So I have my big heavy one, which I don't take on airplanes. And so that becomes my white space. And I always can go back to my things, and I like to have it really big in front of me and draw it out. So I think because we know that to help us become more creative, we need to detach from screens. And there's a lot of interesting research around like writing and doing things with your hands does help actually increase your creativity. It helps your productivity, your thinking, your stress, and all of the good stuff that we need to do for ourselves right now.
Yeah, I love that. And we shared some of those in the blog post that I just put in the chat here, some of those research studies of how it really helps creativity. And I think that's one of the things I miss the most about a classroom, or about, even a work environment, is having those whiteboards where you can think things through. I've even seen classrooms where there's like a big whiteboard in the back where students can kind of iterate with one another. So even having that in the home is really helpful. And just like even putting pieces of paper together on the wall can serve as that.
Yeah, when we're away from our screens, like, we don't have a whole lot of choices and input, because we have like the set keypad, we have like what we can click on, and we're just more free thinkers when we're just with a pen. We can make ugly little drawings. We really push ourselves into seeing, because the whole point of creativity is seeing things in other ways and from other perspectives. That helps increase our creativity. So pushing ourselves to record and think in a different way is a great way to push that for ourselves.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing those 5 ideas with us. And I'm definitely going to start implementing those, especially at the ritual piece in my own daily work with educators. But want to open it up too to those who are tuning in live. If you have questions for Rebecca, I know, Rebecca, you also have a book out called The Space. So I'm going to put a link in here, and I can also even share my screen if you want to talk a little bit about that, and maybe how that relates to classrooms, but even how some of those principles can be used, in a distance learning environment.
Yeah. Well, our book was really just to break down and to help empower teachers to feel like that they're the designers of their learning spaces. Sometimes everything feels given to us, and I think right now our LMS, our schedules, everything feels given to us, and we don't feel really excited always about having an empowered to create the space that we need to. I actually have a physical copy right here.
Oh, nice.
Oddly enough. Yes. That was, I was just talking to somebody today. I was like, I actually have a book at home. I never seem to have them. I always give them away. So So that book was really about like the physical space, and we're writing the second book right now for leaders, which is like to really think about like systemic change in spaces. And it's just been really fun to and challenging to be in this learning environment right now where I can't walk over and sit next to my students and ask them how they're doing. I have to like type up a message and then wait for them to actually respond. And so I think that making sure you're really creating the user experience is you're more of, instead of like a physical designer, you're more of a UX designer right now as a teacher. Mm-hmm. And what does that look like? What does the hook feel like? How hard is it for them to navigate through the different information I've given them? Am I asking them to, every time they open up a tab, it's like going into a new room. Am I asking them to go into 4 or 5 rooms, and do they know how to get back to the first room again? So when we can keep everything in one spot, life is so much easier. And I thought that was just true for my for younger students. And I'm really finding for my high school students as well. When I was in the room with them, I could be like, oh no, honey, just click right there. And I could be there, that support. Now I'm not there anymore. And if they don't watch the videos I've given them,
yeah,
then, then like, they're like, I can't find the information. And I'm like, well, there's a video, I wrote out the steps. And so it can feel so frustrating as a teacher because you're giving everything you can, and you have office hours and you sit there virtually and no one comes to them, and so it's very, very frustrating. And I think we just I think we're going to get really good at user experience. And I would like, I think that's really the next thing, is designing that whole space, the internet space, the space that our information's on, to be as intuitive as possible for our kids.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for that helpful overview. And encourage, if those who haven't read the book, I have a copy here at home too. So it's been really helpful to think through spaces in that sense. I'm going to check in here in the chat too, if there's any other comments or questions. I love this idea here from Mr. Russell. Fill your spaces with your favorite travel trinkets and souvenirs as you can go global from your balcony. Your balcony garden.
That's awesome.
I love that. I know I miss being able to visit other schools and classrooms or travel, and so just having those reminders there can be so helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think changing things up too. And like, especially like something, we talk about in the book is it the principle of addition by subtraction. And it's a really simple principle. And it's easy to remember that, you actually gain opportunities to create a more intentional space when you get rid of things. And so, like about every 2 or 3 months now, more frequently, I just take everything off my desk. My whole desk is like all my inspirations, my trinkets, just like our friend just said. And I switch things up as I get new things and I'm moving them. And I just take everything off my desk and I set it on the floor in a box. And then I put back what's really meaningful to me. And that's one of my little rituals, to be like, okay, this is how I want to feel for this next week or this next month. So I think that's, bring out those trinkets, bring out the things that make you feel good, virtual pictures of your students.
Yeah. And I think that just that environment alone can have such an impact on your overall disposition for the day and ultimately impact your work. And I'm just going to share one more comment here before we wrap up. But Mike from Facebook shares that I sometimes use Apple TV, so share my laptop screen and use Illustrator for a whiteboard. I love that idea. And he's saying it basically turns the TV into a whiteboard.
That's awesome.
Yeah, a new idea that we can all try.
Yes. You can be like your own broadcaster. That sounds really fun.
Yeah,
I try that. There are so many, and it's hard, I think, because we don't have control over what our kids have anymore, and we can't control like their internet connectivity. You and I had a call yesterday, and my internet just went out, and I got 5 emails from students saying that their internet went out last night and they didn't turn in assignments, and I was like, of course. Please don't worry. So everything I think is just a lot of grace and just a lot of love for kids right now. So my job's completely changed. I used to spend all day teaching. Now I'm spending most of my days just trying to connect with my students and see what they're doing and help them in any way that I can.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to lay out too is that we might have all these plans, but really thinking about the reality. Do my students have access? What is the workload from other classes? Think of all the other emotional kind of components that they might be dealing with at home, and just approaching everything moving to staying at home, and being really cognizant of that, and the realities that students have at home.
Yep. And I spent yesterday, I contacted every single one of my students in some form or another. And I had a few of them go, thanks for contacting me. Like, it was good to know. Just saying like, hey, how are you? Is everything okay? Can I help?
Yeah.
And I had one student just say like, I am so overwhelmed. I don't even know where to get started. And I have no motivation to get work done. So we had a conversation just about like, this is what I do when I'm not motivated.
Mm-hmm.
Like my skill sets just, completely shifted. I spent about 20% of my time designing learning experiences, and about 80% of my time trying to track kids down, connect with them, and support them in any way I can. So it's a very different way of teaching and working.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, continuing to navigate that, it's a new environment for all of us. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share these ideas with everyone. And I see some great more comments in the chat. So I know this has been really impactful for me and many educators. And I also wanted to share, we have a blog post on the Adobe Education blog with some of these tips that Rebecca shared today. So I'll go ahead and post that in the chat, but creative spaces and distance learning. And we have the difference between creativity, creative teaching, and then all of these tips that you can access at home. So I encourage you to check those out. I'll stop sharing my screen here. But thank you again, Rebecca. And any other final words or resources that you want to share with those tuning in?
I think the coolest thing is to let's all keep just taking risks and trying to figure out what's the most meaningful thing that we can do. And I wouldn't do today what I started doing 2 weeks ago. And I think in 2 weeks, I'm going to be a totally different person and be doing a better job. So I just stay on the path. And if you've got awesome things, share them out so we can all learn from them together.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And thanks for all those who are tuning in or watching the recording. We'll be back next Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, interviewing Holly Clark as we continue to talk about distance learning themes. But thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Click the link in the description below to explore more free online professional development, and click the link on screen to subscribe to the channel for more videos.